Everybody, and welcome to Lincoln Douglas Debate Video Essentials video number 2. This is going to be covering basic case structure and the value premise. My name is Shreera Meyer, and let's jump right in. Basic case structure. The first point that you want to look at is the fact that there's going to be two different levels of debate in the actual debate round. The first one is going to be a deeper level of thought, but at a higher level and coming earlier in the round, which is what we call framework. Now, throughout all these videos, I'm going to keep going back and addressing different sections of the framework. And just so you guys know, this is what it's in reference to, is the framework. Now, what the framework is it's debate about ideas that are focused on the ethics portion and the philosophy of arguments, as well as some more conceptual ideas that are discussed in the round. So this is where all of the ethical theories go. This is where the philosophies go. This is where people say things about different kinds of concepts and different conceptual things that require a higher level of understanding. Next is the contention level. The contention level is where you bring out where you bring out your main arguments, which are called contentions. And each of these contentions is like a major argument that you have to present, and you'll list them: contention 1, contention 2, contention 3. Each of these can have sub-arguments. And the main point that you want to understand about this is that your contention level supports your framework level. Now, there's an important way in that we differentiate these two, because you can win on framework and lose at the contention level, and you can lose in the contention level and win in a framework level at rounds, depending on how good of a debater you are. And we'll address the winning at different levels later. However, in the contention level, you have to use all the facts that you present, empirical evidence, analytics, so empirics and analytics, in order to support your framework. Framework is where you present your ideas. Contention level is where you support it. That's the nutshell. So what we're going to be talking about today is going to be concerning the framework, and that's going to be the way it's going to be for the next few videos. Is first the framework, because the framework for me was something that was not taught very deeply, and the framework is really the pillars for your whole case, is the foundation of your case. The framework is where you lay literally the framework for making all of your contention level arguments within. So the framework is a very important point to address, and that's where we're going to talk about it first. So now, what goes in the framework? Right now I've listed up like a blown up version of the little diagram you saw before. This is the framework. Now, previously what you saw was just a summary of what kind of topics the framework deals with. This will be actual things that will appear in your case that the framework is required to have, and needs to be listed as such. So first of all, the framework, as I said before, is the ethical and conceptual perspective of your case. And in the framework, you have a value criterion, a justification for your value criterion, definitions, and observations. So I'm going to go down the list and mention what each one of these things is. There'll be videos for each one of these of the words that I've listed here. But right now we're just going to focus on the value today. But right now I'll give you a quick run through of what each of them are. So the value, first of all, the value is going to be what is the end goal, the end conceptual goal of the round. So your value is going to be what you aim to establish. Now the value is usually going to be triggered by some word that appears in the resolution. I'll talk about this in the next slide. Your value criterion is going to be what are you going to use to evaluate your value. Because you see, your value is going to be something that's very conceptual, something that like morality. Morality is a concept. We don't know if we truly are moral people. That's how do we determine morality is a big question that we always hit. Well, how do we say that this is moral and something is not? As you know, there's a whole issue of moral and ethical decisions, which the whole judicial branch of the government is based off of. And so we need some way to evaluate the value. What determines what is right or wrong? And that's what our value criterion is. Now, you don't always have to use the same value criterion in every case. For some resolutions, you may find it easier to say that, okay, if we evaluate what is right or wrong based off of some standard, then I find that all of these arguments are supporting my view. So if you're affirmative, you'd say, okay, it supports the affirmative view if the value criterion is this, whereas it supports the negative view if the value criterion is this. And you have to justify why that value criterion would be a good evaluator of the value. So now it's getting a little complex. So I'll give you an example here. Let's let me change my color for a second. Okay. So let's take the value of morality. Simple. Morality is a code of conduct that decides what is good and what is bad. And it's a code of conduct that is commonly held by all rational persons as to what is good or right. The value criterion is going to be how we use to evaluate morality. So what a lot of people use to evaluate morality is how much good are we doing versus how much bad. Does the good outweigh the bad? And it's kind of weighing your options. It's what's probably one of the most commonly used methods of evaluating whether a decision is going to be moral. So weighing the good versus the bad. Does the good outweigh the bad? That's actually the formal name for that kind of system. It's called utilitarianism. I can't spell. Utilitarianism. And this is oftentimes it's shortened to the word util. So don't be caught off guard if I use that. So why is utilitarianism a good judgment of morality? So why will it be a good evaluator of how moral we'll be? So there's several justifications for why utilitarianism will be good. There's many reasons you can come up with. I could just say that in practical approach in the United States government, any governing body must take into consideration utilitarianism because no other system would work, as the United States government's primary interest is to do what's in the best interest of all people. Another thing I could say is we must maximize good in whatever way possible, and utilitarianism does that. Now, here is a major thing that you need to understand about utilitarianism. Utilitarianism should not be your value criterion. What your value criterion should be phrased as is something like maximizing good or minimizing suffering. In fact, it should almost always be minimizing suffering, because minimizing suffering is closer to morality and more understandable than just saying utilitarianism and assuming that your judge and that your opponent know what utilitarianism is. Even if it's something that's commonly understood by all debaters, minimizing suffering is going to be, if you're debating for a lay judge, minimizing suffering is going to be a lot more understandable. Now, there's several reasons why minimizing suffering is going to be an excellent value criterion. One of the most commonly used ones is the fact that nobody likes pain, and so pain is an incentive to minimize suffering, as you would rationally not want to experience pain. So pain bad is an example of a justification for a value criterion. Now this will get much more complex and much more deep. However, this is just a brief overview. Now going back down, we have definitions. Now definitions are, if you look at the resolution, there'll be ways of defining words in the resolution that you think are important and that you think your way of defining it that is special or is different is going to help you in the round. You have to support these definitions as well, and this can be done by giving definitions from a reputable dictionary such as Britannica Encyclopedia dictionaries, Merriam-Webster. Online dictionaries are also acceptable, but something with significant credit to be respected. And you need to also do a good job refuting your definitions. Finally is observations. Observations are kind of like side notes. They're not as important as the other four we've talked about. But observations do play an important part when the resolution has some kind of wording that's not exactly clear. So one example of that was, if you look at the last video, I gave the resolution resolved rehabilitation ought to be valued over retribution in the United States criminal justice system. An observation of that could be concerning the words value over, for example. And in any kind of confusing word situation, you can always try and make an observation. Your observation will be refuted by your opponent, but it's important to know that you can use observations to help strengthen your case. Last thing I'm going to talk about, general framework, is the fact that when you go through rebutting this, suppose this is the affirmative and the negative has to rebut this. The negative is going to want to hit every point. Even if it's only going to be one or two sentences, we want to hit everything. So if the affirmative value is going to be morality and the negative's value is justice, then you should probably rebut this, but there's also several arguments around that. I'm going to talk about that in the next next clip that's coming up. Also, you definitely want to rebut the value criterion. If your value criterion is different from theirs, then you need to pull out your justifications for your value criterion and start talking about why your value criterion is going to be a better value criterion, not only to support the value, but further around. Oftentimes you'll see that both the negative and the affirmative will have the value of morality, but they will have different value criterions. And those value criterions are what will result in most of the debate. And the justifications to the value criterion become very important. The justifications, as you said before, is why should we use the value criterion to evaluate the value. So that's especially important. The definition should also be argued against, because your opponent's definition might be formatted to only support his or her case and not yours, so you should definitely argue with those definitions, because they could exclude some of the arguments that you're trying to make. Finally, observations. If there's an observation that you feel your opponent is being abusive in, or is making an argument that you feel you cannot respond to, then you should definitely attack these observations, as sometimes they're unreasonable and are definitely need to be addressed. So that's just a basic framework overview. Now we're going to be talking just about the value. The value. So, basic definition of a value is something that society holds to be good. Something that is desirable by all people. Something that is desirable by all rational people, I should say. And one reason that morality fits very well as a value is the fact that morality is defined as a rational code of conduct that would be accepted by all people and that determines good or bad. By all rational people is what I mean. So something that society holds to be good is our value definition. Now, why morality is also good value is because many of the resolutions that you'll encounter have a trigger for using morality, such as the word ought. Now, ought is defined as some kind of duty or a moral obligation to do something. So, ought triggers morality very often, and that is the reason why you can use morality as a value in your cases. I think that there should only be 3 values that any debater uses. However, there's people that tell you that you can use any different thing as a value. The 3 that I believe in are morality, of course, justice, and there's different names for this. There's governmental legitimacy or obligation. So first, morality, of course, you know, as I've said before, is a code of conduct that all rational people would accept, determining what is good and what is bad. Justice is there's different definitions, of course. It's, in short, doing what is just or to grant the right judgment to someone, doing justice. So in cases concerning criminal justice or some kind of law being violated, justice would be a value for that. Government legitimacy / obligation. What that basically is when a government fulfills all of its obligations to its people and can fulfill all of its responsibilities that it's been given, then we consider it a legitimate government. Now, I would not personally try and prove one of these over the other, because each of these is interlinking. Each of these plays an important role in determining how well the other one serves as a value. So some can argue that you need morality in order to have a just code of conduct, whereas some people say that justice is necessary for morality to exist. So it's really like a circular argument, which could just take up time in a debate and would not actually have any fruitful argument. So these three are important values to focus on. One thing that you want to make sure that you don't do is use a value criterion as a value. For example, I've seen somebody say that their value criterion, I'm going to use VC as the initials for value criterion. They said that their value, my bad. They said that their value is utilitarianism. Now, you can't value utilitarianism because utilitarianism is a system in order to try and determine what is moral. And that inherently is telling you that you're going to try and value morality. Whereas what they're saying is, we're going to value the system, which is not something that society holds to be good and true, because not everybody holds that utilitarianism is the best system in order to determine morality. However, everybody agrees that morality is something that we strive towards. So you don't want to value something like utilitarianism. You really want to value one of these three things and use whatever moral code or moral system that you're going to be looking towards to try and prove these three. So one last thing that I forgot to mention, it was on the last clip actually, is that the value criterion, I said, I might refer to it sometimes as the standard. And this is just a matter of East Coast versus West Coast thing. People refer to a value criterion and standard differently, but the point is that they're both the same. So I might write VCJ as value criterion justifications and SJ as standard justifications. But it doesn't matter, both of these are the same, and just keep that in mind. So this video has just been a basic overview of the value structure, as well as the basic case structure and framework structure. And I hope that your watching this video has improved your knowledge of values as well as the framework, and I hope that's helpful.